Is your job at stake right now? For your sake, I certainly hope not, but that is the reality that many Americans are facing right now. Layoffs.fyi shows layoffs by month and by quarter in terms of employees and layoffs, showing a massive number of layoffs into the end of 2022 and beginning of 2023. Despite the fact that Meta cut 11,000 jobs last November, they're already talking about starting another round of thousands of layoffs. A medical device company called Medtronic has begun layoffs around the world. Retail stores like David's Bridal have started mass layoffs. Law firms have begun layoffs. Financial services like Ernst Young have started layoffs, and RBC as well. We're also seeing upcoming job losses from business closures, such as US Auto Sales, which is a car dealer for people with bad credit. They have closed their dealerships and will obviously have job losses as a result. So what in the world is going on here? Why are we seeing such a surge in layoffs recently, especially considering during 2020 and 2021, it seemed like companies couldn't hire fast enough? What we are seeing right now unfold before our eyes is the classic boom bust cycle. Step number one, you have easy credit. Now, obviously, this happened during 2020. We saw interest rates go to record low levels, money being printed and handed out all over the place. Step number two, that money works its way throughout the economy, bidding up prices of goods and services and then wages. Step number three, at some point, that leverage starts to get pulled back. At some point, instead of the money supply continuing to increase through that easy credit, a flip happens and the punch bowl gets pulled away from the market. Step four, you then begin an unwind of everything that happened before. This is the bust part of the cycle, where all the malinvestment unwinds, all the misallocation of resources is realized, and you have a collapse in all the areas that should never have been invested in to begin with. I'll give you a short illustration just to highlight this cycle that I'm talking about. Imagine you have 10 people in a closed economy and they all have $10. So the entire economy has just $100. But one person one day decides to go to the bank and they get a loan. And we know that the banks operate by loaning money into existence. So this guy goes and gets a loan for another $10. So now the money supply, instead of being $100 for the economy, is $110. So this guy takes that new money that he just borrowed and he uses it to fix his roof. Keep in mind, he is fixing his roof with money that he did not have otherwise. If he wouldn't have gotten that loan, he wouldn't have been able to fix his roof. And he was only able to afford that loan because interest rates were low enough, because that bank was loaning money into existence. They weren't loaning out money that they already had from someone else. So person number one fixes his roof. That money then goes to the roof repairman. Now that roof repairman has income he wouldn't have had otherwise, and so he goes and buys a pair of shoes that he wouldn't have bought otherwise. And now there's business for the shoemaker that he wouldn't have had otherwise. And because of the booming demand, he has to hire a new employee to help out with making the new shoes. And on and on this goes as you get more employment and more income around the circle. But the party starts as soon as the debt from the original guy starts to get repaid. He has to take income that he earns and not spend it. He has to turn around towards the bank and pay that debt off. That means instead of there being $110 in circulation now, the first guy, when he pays off his debt, now the amount of money in circulation goes back down to $100. And so since he spends less money in order to deleverage and pay off that debt, now the next person that he would have bought stuff from otherwise doesn't get as much income as they were expecting at the grocery store. And since the grocery store doesn't get the income they were planning on originally, now they can't buy that pair of shoes. And since the shoemaker now doesn't have the same demand as before, he has to fire his employee that he hired to deal with all the original artificial demand. Now, obviously, this is a caricature of what happens, but it illustrates the reality. When you print a bunch of money into existence, you cause a boom and then you have an inevitable bust. That's why it's the very same companies who were hiring like crazy and expanding like crazy in 2020 and 2021 that are now laying off like crazy. Amazon basically doubled their workforce during COVID and is now laying off thousands and thousands of employees. Job postings on Indeed in the United States have sunk to a new low level they haven't been at since June of 2021. The same problem also gave rise to zombie companies. Because when all this money is printed, the big money knows eventually it'll cause inflation. So the big money says, I need to put this into an asset that will appreciate at least enough to compensate me for the loss in purchasing power. That's why asset prices started to explode so quickly following the printing in March and April of 2020. But it doesn't stop there, because as the normal asset prices start to increase, then everybody who's an investor wants a return that's better than the benchmark, and the benchmark is those normal assets. So money starts chasing high returns extremely quickly. And who is able to promise high returns? Usually it's not the companies with very long track records and established businesses. It's the new businesses, many tech, things like crypto and NFTs, electric semi-trucks, unproven concepts promising massive futuristic technology. Essentially, the fraudsters come out of the woodworks when there's so much easy money flooding around looking for a place to go. It's specifically looking for the place that is promising the highest returns. So the people who are not afraid of promising those high returns are going to come out to play. But even without the fraud, all this easy money flooding around forces companies and individuals to do something with it, leading to the rise of companies like Google hiring talent to do fake work just to stop them from being able to work for rivals. Literally, this is companies deciding to light money on fire, waste their resources just to have performance better than the competition. These are not things that happen during normal business periods or without top-down intervention, otherwise known as free markets. In unregulated free markets, individuals only care about their own profitability. Lighting money on fire does not make you more profitable, it makes you less so. The bottom line is that this boom-bust cycle, what happens when the money is printed and the credit is easy, is it incentivizes wasting of resources. And the key thing to understand about this is that malinvestment happens during the boom. That's when the resources are being wasted. That's when the money is being lit on fire. When the bust starts, the only thing that we're seeing is the realization of that wasted resources, the realization of that destroyed capital, the realization of the misallocation of resources and the malinvestment. The damage has already been done. And the catalyst for this bust is when the Federal Reserve started to tighten. Because as soon as you see prices running away from you, if you don't change course as a central bank, then the currency hyperinflates. And we've seen that happen time and time again all around the world throughout history. And so you have to stop that increase of the money supply, or else you risk hyperinflating your currency. So you do this by doing the opposite of what you did to increase the money supply. You start to raise interest rates and sell assets as the central bank. This is the express purpose of tightening, is to bring pain to households and businesses. This is not a side effect. In order to stop runaway inflation, you have to take income away from people. The Fed has been saying this all along. You do this by reducing employment. And you reduce employment by pulling back on the money supply. The issue is they may be doing that at a little bit of a faster pace than the economy can handle. Right now, the money supply growth rate is a negative 6%, which means the money supply is falling faster than it has for at least 60 years. This, in addition to the rising interest rates, is causing a credit crunch, with banks pulling back on credit because of the higher interest rates and also the stress that that is putting on their balance sheets, leaving them vulnerable to collapse or bank runs. And with banks lending less, that's again less income for businesses and individuals to be able to spend. And one person's expense is another person's income, and down we spiral. Now, there is some good news here, because it's not everybody's job at risk here. But if you would like to make sure that you are immune to these financial storms, become a member at Heresy Financial University, where you get access to an ever-expanding library of financial courses so that you can learn how to grow your wealth and protect it. link below. Most of the job losses that are taking place right now are for skilled jobs, not for unskilled jobs. The differentiating factor here is the level of education necessary for the job. Less than high school diploma is seeing a massive increase in demand, whereas jobs requiring bachelor's degrees or higher are seeing worse and worse figures. The good news is that there are always jobs that are absolutely necessary for a thriving economy, and these jobs aren't going anywhere. There's more and more demand for those jobs than ever. But the bad news is, if your job is one of those fake jobs, the useless jobs, whose job description includes basically attending meetings, well then the companies that hired you to do that are likely getting ready to stop paying you to do that. Now, this will be painful for the people who have those jobs, but overall, this is what is necessary in order to cure the malinvestment. That's what a recession is for. It is so that all the misallocation of resources can be undone. A great example of this is the tax situation in the United States right now. In most countries, you have return-free filing. The government knows how much money you owe them, and so they just tell you and you pay. If you disagree with the amount that they say you owe, then you can go through the work of disputing that and looking at your income situation and seeing if maybe they got something wrong. Otherwise, you just pay what they owe. But in the United States, it's an entirely different situation where they say to you, figure out how much you owe us and then pay us that amount of money. And then if you actually owed us a different amount, then we're gonna come after you. So they know how much you owe them, but they're not gonna tell you. They're gonna make you hire tax professionals in order to help you figure it out. So if we simply switched over to return-free filing, you would have massive job losses of all the accountants, all the tax preparers out there. TurboTax probably wouldn't even exist. But guess what? That is a drain on society. It's decently hard work. You have to be highly intelligent and hardworking to be able to fulfill those jobs. So the thousands and thousands of people that we have dedicating their lives, their entire careers, to doing something that is actually a waste for society. It doesn't have to be done. That is a misallocation of resources. If that job was unnecessary and didn't exist, all those hardworking, smart people that are driven would be doing other jobs instead that would actually produce something for society. Maybe they'd be in the medical field, maybe they'd go into engineering, maybe they'd be architects, who knows what they would do. But you'd have a much higher chance of their careers contributing something to society instead of fulfilling something that's a net waste. Which means that right now, as this bust unfolds and we see deflation set in and we see the credit crunch set in and we see businesses start to fold and we see layoffs start to happen. This happens in the areas where the most waste is happening first. Meta laid off 1,000 jobs last year at a reported cost of $88,000 per head. And guess what? Those heads were the ones that were producing the least amount of revenue for the company. And as this happens all across the economy, the dead wood gets burnt off and the resources in the economy get reallocated where they are needed and most. So what can you specifically do yourself in order to fireproof yourself? Well, number one, to become fireproof is just personally have a little bit of a fortress build up for yourself. Get some savings built up and get out of debt, especially things like credit card debt. You want a moat around yourself so that if the attack comes, you'll be able to fend off the attackers for a while. So buy some gold, buy some Bitcoin, have some cash savings, get rid of that high interest rate debt, especially the adjustable rate debt. Second, if you think that your job is at risk, you need to start applying for other jobs as quickly as possible. Get something else lined up just in case you need it. You don't want to start dusting off your resume the day that you walk out with your box and your pink slip. Number three, try as much as possible to become unfireable by number one, learning all the necessary skills to become the best in your position, become a top performer. If that means getting there early, staying late, making key relationships with people. If there's somebody who you know, hey, this would be the person that would make the decision on who they're letting go and who they're keeping, become best friends with that person. This is, at the end of the day, people making these decisions. So become unfireable. A fantastic book about this is called Barking Up the Wrong Tree by Eric Barker. It's a fantastic book that'll help you move up the ladder, or at least prevent you from getting kicked off of that ladder. At the end of the day, no storm lasts forever, and this one too shall pass. But we are likely to see at least a little bit more economic pain before things start to turn around, because the size of the bust is commensurate with the size of the boom, and, well, we had one of the biggest artificial booms in history. So hang on tight. As always, really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.